Hello everyone, my name is Saket and this is the Design Podcast. Last episode we had Narayan Subramaniam, who is the co-founder of Ultraviolette Automotive. Their product F77 is already creating waves in the Indian market. If you have enjoyed the last episode, well, this episode is gonna just blow your mind. Last episode it was all about his design journey and exploring several avenues. This episode it's all about building this company along with his co-founder Neeraj. Narayan will take us through the entire journey from exploring several ideas before funneling down to performance EV motorcycle segment as their first product, why they chose Ultraviolette as the company name, why F77. There are so many interesting stories like this. He will have advices for aspiring designers, for designers who are in the industry, people who are aspiring to become design entrepreneurs. If you are even remotely connected to design, or this EV segment, I think this podcast is gonna bring so much value to you. That's why I recommend you guys to watch till the end and enjoy this episode. After completing your Daihatsu internship, when was that moment? Again, coming back to the same thing. When was that moment when you decided that, fine, I have taken enough experience of different places, countries, meeting various people from different cultures.
Right.
Now let me go back and figure out something of my own.
Right.
What was that moment?
So I think step one here was figuring out what I want to do for my graduation project.
Okay.
So this, you can either work with the industry and do a project, or you can take a self-proposed project as well.
True, yeah.
And while at NID, I had worked with Mahindra on my final project at that point, which was on motorcycles.
Okay.
Worked on four-wheelers in my other two internship and when I was in Germany as well. And worked on several other form factors, interior projects and infotainment-related projects while in the course with other companies. Worked on a very interesting project brief from Bang Olufsen while we were in Omeo as well on a car interior sort of a thing.
Oh, nice.
Which was where I got to, explore beyond infotainment. How do you look at the overall novelty of an experience for someone in a four-wheeler?
Right.
And how can the interiors adapt to you than you adapting to the interiors? And I think all of this translates to what we are doing with motorcycles today. But but explored some very interesting ideas like, the concept of cymatics, sound waves traveling along a string, different frequencies, all of that. So that sort of led me to think, what if the interiors of a vehicle is a very seamless object made of, or a very seamless experience made of similar structures where, depending on your body size and your postures, etc., it can mold and form according to you. And what I also did was work on a few self-initiated projects as well. And Sweden, that was one cool thing. There is 8 months of the year. You have 3 hours of sunlight in the day, right?
True.
So you lose track of day and night. And which is great for a designer, right? We love working at night most of the time. So ended up putting in easily more than 12-15 hours of work on a consistent basis. I'm still hearing it from my mom, like, please go to sleep before midnight. And I think from our 4 a.m. days, now we're down to, I think, 1 a.m. We're hitting the bed. But it helped in focusing on what you want to do. So I worked on several self-initiated projects and took part in multiple competitions. This is one more thing that is important, I think, as inputs for students. Apart from your college curriculum, whatever it is, keep track of interesting global competitions where you're constantly pitting yourself against talent from all parts of the world.
True.
So that sort of is a scale for you to see how your skills are progressing, how your ideas are progressing, and how you're able to communicate things to a global audience. So I won the Move Awards in Europe in 2013.
I remember that. Yeah.
That was a very cool pickup truck project, right? Again, it's not about styling. It's about the whole idea was for an Indian context, if there's a traffic jam and a car is broken down, can we make a truck that, drives over the other vehicles, comes to the spot, picks up the vehicle?
I vividly remember that, sketch of yours, because that was, again, it was not a very regular kind of brief,
Right.
Those are ugly looking vehicles, right?
Correct.
Nobody's thinking of, providing a beautiful solution for them.
Yeah.
And you addressed that problem, and
Yeah.
it was, very much what do you say? It had that baggage of what happens in Indian scenario.
Correct.
I remember that sketch
Okay.
vividly.
The floating cabin with the
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was also very, very interesting. One of my favorite projects while I was in Umeo as well. It wasn't a super bike or a super car or anything very fancy, but like you said, a very functional approach to what we overlook as a regular problem, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a cool thing. Went to Italy for the award ceremony, collected the awards, etc., and got a chance for a day to like get on the Lamborghini Aventador. So I had it with me in Italy for the better part of the day, and like, oh man, like
So you drove and like in normal roads and all.
normal roads from Milan to Bologna to Florence, like
Wow.
it was great.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think my student time, maybe that was one of the highlights where, like after a lot of hard work, you allow something like, allow yourself to enjoy. And
Wow, man, awesome. That could have been some experience.
Yeah.
Because, getting the best sports car and then
and this was the matte gray Lamborghini Aventador with the scissor doors, right? And you sit there and you have the paddle shift with you. It's like a video game, like in real life.
damn, like you getting that poster car in your hands and then
Yeah.
getting to drive not in India where the
Yeah.
infrastructure is not good, but yeah, awesome. So when you were exploring all these projects,
Right.
when was that time when you came back to electric mobility as a focus point?
Yeah. So this leads me back to my grad project, and so I was looking at global mobility requirements or opportunities where mobility can, there needs to be a drastic change to the way things are. And this is when I decided, let me do the project by myself rather than work with a company's brief.
Okay.
So that there is full freedom in exploring multiple ideas.
All right.
And so I looked at micromobility, looked at shared commute, looked at four-wheelers, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, the whole spectrum of, different possibilities, and everything led to electric.
Okay.
So one thing maybe will be interesting is Neeraj and I worked with lithium-ion batteries right from 2004-5. During our engineering times, we worked with several lithium-ion batteries and chemistries itself. So we've sort of dealt with all these issues at a lower scale in terms of overheating, in terms of catching fire, all of these problems that the industry is talking about, right?
Okay.
And we sort of dealt with ways to mitigate all of these problems, but of course in a way that made sense at that point. So now we were aware of where the battery prices are at. We were able to confidently forecast that by 2020, around 2020 is when prices will fall to where you can get to close to price parity with IC engine vehicles. Earlier it was $1,000 per kilowatt hour. Now it's closer to 200 or lesser than that possibly.
Right.
And we could see signs of this back at that point itself. And
Wow, that was quite early. 2015, you said, right?
2015.
Wow. Actually, that's very interesting. Like you were already thinking of future, and it's interesting that you went back to the past where you and Neeraj were like
Right.
both the founders,
Right.
and you went back and then used all those
Right.
past baggage with the batteries and
Right.
everything, and then you tried to figure out, okay, now this is the future we are heading to, and this
Right.
is the background we had. We had several
Right.
things figured out. We have this experience,
Right.
and I'm sure Neeraj, while you were pursuing design, he was also excelling in his
Right.
engineering part of it. So when,
He was in on the tech side. He was with Yahoo for some time on the software side.
Okay.
Then he did his MBA. Then he worked with a company called NetApp.
Okay.
Very interesting role, which is coordinating between very sound PhD team and
Okay.
trying to drive research objectives to commercial requirements, looking at projects that are 3 to 5 years out on the horizon.
Awesome. What I want to praise here is that you both together, I think you make a really good team because you bring something very unique on the table. It's not like same skills or same.
It's very complementary.
Yeah, it's very complementary.
Yeah.
You have the creative side of it, and then he has more technical, and,
Yeah.
and then his experiences, as you are mentioning,
Right.
that Yahoo and things like that. and you have experience from OEMs
Right.
from around the world. This becomes like a very complementary combination.
Right.
And I think that's working out for the best. So
Right.
that's super cool. So
And
yeah.
I think we share a very strong interest towards creative output in general.
Okay.
And aircrafts are another common point of interest. He had a drone startup as well back in 2009-10.
Wow.
I was involved in a small way in that endeavor, but yeah, that was happening on his side back then itself.
Okay. So when you guys came back in 2015 or 16, whenever you were
Right.
discussing it, so you had already figured out that electric mobility is something which is going to have concrete future,
Right.
and maybe 5-6 years down the line, and you already had some experiences which you can club and you utilize here.
Sure.
So during that time, were you aware or were you clear that you wanted to make a performance motorcycle, which is going to be something like F77,
Sure.
or you were like still exploring?
So the first 1 year went into total exploring. Of course, a performance motorcycle in this context was on our minds, but we were looking at like a whole spectrum of ideas that we want to sort of get our get ground up understanding on. So one idea we were looking at was first and last mile commute. So which also ties into what my grad project was revolving around.
Okay.
Worked on self-balancing vehicles. The constraint was it needs to be less than 7 kgs, right? A battery pack plus the drivetrain plus the wheel and the tire and everything should be less than about 7-ish kilos.
Wow.
Worked on one concept which was a self-driving vehicle, single wheel self-balancing vehicle.
Okay.
Then worked on another idea which is sort of, the kick scooters today, right?
Yeah.
So it was a different take on that system.
Okay.
The kick scooters that you see, even companies like in certain parts of the world are using them for deliveries and
Right.
first mile commute, last mile commute. So these are just scaled up versions of what kids are driving. So the physics, the geometry, the ergonomics, it doesn't work at all. It's very unstable. It's doing the job of getting from A to B faster than jogging.
Correct.
But it's not really a safe or meaningful way to commute.
It's not very efficient in every aspect.
Right.
Okay. So you addressed, like you understood that this might be a valid problem to solve.
Yeah, so there we went deep into how we're looking at it. From analyzing the posture, in today's current kick scooters, you have place to place 1 foot on the platform. The second foot is, halfway on top of the wheel, or you're kicking yourself and moving forward. So when you apply a brake, now the steering connects directly to the stem of the steering goes to the front wheel. So you apply the front brake, there's a lot of, force. The direction of that force vector is prompting you to topple over. How do we relook at this? How do we, the Bimota Tessie 3D bikes, right?
Yeah, of course.
Which had a forkless steering architecture.
Yes.
So could we look at something like that for this application?
Okay.
And studied that inside out to figure out what works. And that motorcycle is beautiful. Turning radius is a problem, but there is no nosedive when you're braking into a corner, exiting a corner.
Marvel, I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely. So how do we sort of get that into a 7 kg format?
Wow.
Was our brief.
Okay.
So we got to the level of seeing where in human, sports or dance and things like that, are you in a posture where you're stable yet dynamic? And what is your body orientation like? So this comes from activities like kickboxing, certain forms of dance. And so we narrowed down on that, then designed the vehicle around it to facilitate you being able to ride it in that posture. Where your body itself is absorbing some of the impact, the shocks, and it's performing the damping functionality. And the vehicle is just conducive or aiding that mobility itself. So it was the stemless steering, where we had a multiple mechanism going to the wheel. It was a spokeless or a hubless wheel in the front. The back wheel had a hub motor.
Wow.
And we designed an app as well to sort of configure your requirements on all of this.
Crazy.
So it was a very compact thing, but crazy amount of creative engineering and design went into making this happen.
Oh, awesome. How long was this journey?
So this was one of the things we worked on in those 15 months. So we worked on a single wheel concept. We worked on this, what I was talking about in terms of a waveboard. like it's closer to surfing on the road than using a kick scooter on the road. This was 2. We worked on another brief which was floated by the Taiwan, I think Infra Development or Bicycle Development Board, right, or Mobility Development Board, which was around ideas that will get grants when it comes to solving mobility issues in urban developments.
Okay.
So there is this problem of, I think all of us are health conscious, becoming more so, and could we develop something like a bicycle where you don't want to cycle and reach your work at 9 a.m. all sweaty, right? But you don't mind cycling back home after work, right? How do we now do this? Today you have pedelecs, you have hub motors and the mid motor drives, etc. But it is still a cycle. It's not solving the problem entirely. So we looked at a different architecture itself. We redesigned the entire frame, which facilitated the frame to rotate 180 degrees and offer you 2 ergonomics. So in mode 1, the ergonomics are of a cruiser, where you're sitting down low, the motor is performing the drive, and the pedals fold in, and you're sort of like cruising to office in the morning. Mode 2, you have a latch that unlocks and the whole frame flips 180 degrees, and you're now in a cycle mode where you're seated higher and the ergonomics are conducive to pedal.
Wow, interesting.
And the inspiration for this came from, and it has to be light, right? So we looked at birds, the skeletal structure of birds, right? And how birds are like it's nature's marvel. Like, how are they strong yet able to fly so seamlessly, effortlessly? So a lot has to do with the pneumatic structure of the bones, right? How the bones are all more or less hollow structures,
exactly.
It's like our, some of the supercars we see, these 3D printed wishbones and other structures, right? So went back to that level, drew the design inspiration and the engineering inspiration from that, and designed our frames and structures accordingly. We built a working prototype, tested all of this out. It was functioning. We won an award from the Taiwan Council as well. So Neeraj, me, one more person from our team, Karthik. It was a 4-5 member team at that point. We went to Taiwan, spent a week there, and that was a great experience. And so looked at about 3-4 such ideas, and at this point, we also ended up spending some time in the US, renting out the Tesla P100Ds, figuring out the driving experience around it. How is it with region? How is it without region? How is it in the ludicrous mode? How do you drive it regularly in a city? What is evoking a certain sense of fun and excitement? What is providing responsibility? What is providing you the trust in the vehicle's ability to perform? Spent some time in Taiwan as well, apart from this competition as well, where I think Gogoro had launched. What was interesting is looking at the different business models where you're separating the energy side of the equation and the vehicle side of the equation. Pros and cons of that, and Better Place tried it for cars, spent a couple of $1 billion. I think the time and the effort going into changing the batteries on a 4-wheeler are just too much. And if you provide meaningful range, now it's clear that you don't really require that as a
battery as a solution.
So all of this went into 2016, where we narrowed down to let's make a performance motorcycle for India. Right. So this is the 15-month prelude to starting Ultraviolette.
Wow. So you talked about that you decided to go for the performance motorcycle.
Right.
Now, when it comes to electrical mobility, and then you mentioned the problem areas, so it would have made equal sense to go for a scooter or personal mobility, right? So why did you choose performance motorcycle only for your company?
So I think between Neeraj and me, it was again a question of back to basics, like 0 or 1. Do we want to do something lukewarm, or do we want to do something amazing? It was basically coming down to that. And 3 very important factors. First being, when it comes to scooters, China has made scooter components commodity. You will see enough and more companies in India that are importing from Southeast Asia, rebranding it and selling it here, right?
True.
Those sort of maybe make sense in those countries and geographies with lower ambient temperatures or more predictable use cases. Not going to function for the spectrum of use cases that we have in India
True.
So one is there's not too much scope to develop tech or solutions or designs ground up when it comes to the scooter segment. A lot of it was already existing.
Already saturated.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And we were also, I think, pretty clear that the larger companies are going to get into the scooter markets. So then it becomes a question of getting market share and offering lower price points. And when you take that approach, there is no room for innovation. So most important factor was that. Second was, I think India is a unique market, or some parts of Asia are unique in that sense, where motorcycles are very aspirational and highly emotional attachment towards motorcycles, right?
Correct,
Scooters are utility.
Right.
If it performs what, 4 members in the family, each of them is probably going to use the scooter. Maybe someone goes to college, someone buys groceries and the odd jobs around the house. And that is the decision-making process for a scooter. When it comes to motorcycles, the performance is super important, of course, but the design plays a very, very critical role in your projection of your personality through owning the motorcycle, right?
It's a statement in a way.
Absolutely. And right from when we were kids, we were waiting for that point in life to make that statement, right?
Right. Yeah.
Then you transition to four-wheelers later on in life, then it's not about a statement anymore. At a point, if someone can afford a 1 crore, 2 crore car, maybe then it becomes another statement.
Right.
But then there's a delta from your early 20s to your late 40s of where a motorcycle is, the exact statement that you want to project outwards.
Wow, that's quite an insight actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as designers, right, we are people who love creating emotional products or products that evoke a certain emotion.
Right.
So from that point of view, motorcycles was, I think, like a very solid area to get started on.
Wow.
And third aspect was, I think we had enough of looking to the east or the west for inspiration. When it comes to cool, desirable products, and not only talking about vehicles, you look at companies like Apple based out of US, right, and the kind of elevated experience they provide over the rest of the market. You talk about Kawasaki, Suzuki, Yamaha, these companies, like great products, Honda coming out of Japan, heritage of many decades of racing and know-how knowledge. Then you talk about Italy and the sensuous approach towards product design, Germany and the robustness of the vehicles, and we today have the talent here to make that happen. And we felt at that point in 2016, like we need to create, we have an opportunity to put India on the world map where the whole world takes note of design and technology coming out of India.
Wow.
And mid-segment motorcycles was the answer.
It's quite a story actually. Like when I look back, you're talking about 2016, right?
Right.
So this is like 6-7 years back when everybody was little confused about what's happening. Definitely China was there doing so many innovations with the electric mobility.
Right.
And during that time, whatever all the 3 pointers you said, I think you were thinking for the future.
Right.
And now when I look back, it's all making sense perfectly. So I want to appreciate or praise the fact that you and Neeraj had that clarity or vision.
Right. And stuck to that.
Yeah.
I think there have been several moments where multiple inputs have come in, but I think now it starts to make sense for not just us, but people who had different perspectives as well.
It's all conviction and persistence basically.
Right.
Which leads to the final success.
Right.
Awesome, man. So tell me something. Ultraviolette.
Right.
It's such a nice name. It has a very cool, vibe to it.
Right.
And it has a huge recall value. You don't have to tell again and again.
Yeah.
So, and it's such a simple name to remember.
Right.
Because, everybody will be talking about it. And there's always this cool element related to that name.
Right.
And when I think about it, Ultraviolette, it's such a straightforward, simple, easy to remember name. Which is right next to you.
Right.
But nobody ever thought of using that name.
Right.
So how did you arrive at that name? Tell me the story about it.
I think you answered a lot of those points in your question.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So all of it was, of course, taken into account by us. The recall value, the possibility of making it UV as a short form, and See, historically, what's happened in India is people use their names or family names to start businesses and companies. And I mean, it's time for a change, right? We are creating a global product, creating a global impact.
Right.
The name needs to resonate that. And we were clear about that. So when you're looking at names, Violet was something we were very excited by, Violette. And there's, of course, a very cool French connection from a personal side as well. And also happens to be one of the words that is enunciated or pronounced similarly across multiple languages. So we have this problem, right? Is it Skoda, Skada? Like there's some 100 ways in which you can call it. Like here in India, people say Volkswagen, but it's actually Volkswagen.
Right.
And it's not wagon, it's wagon. Like there's too many things to deal with when you're talking about a product or a company that scales globally.
Classic example is Citroen, no?
Yeah.
Like everywhere. And Citroen, we call it Citroen, but I think the actual pronunciation is completely different.
Right.
I don't even remember that now. But yeah, that's true. Okay.
So we were clear, we can't deal with this confusion. So Violet is Violet in most languages across the world. And we want to make things extra and super cool and performance oriented, and that's where Ultra comes in.
Awesome.
So
UV again, it's again nice abbreviation.
Yes.
Awesome. So tell me next thing. Obviously, you are all aviation enthusiasts.
Right.
And Ultraviolet, you already had this name. What was the story behind F77?
Right.
Definitely that connection from F14s and all.
Correct.
I understand that there is some relation with aviation, but why 77?
Sure.
What is that story?
So adding to that, so it's not just a few of us who are aviation enthusiasts. It goes a lot deeper. The aviation DNA is very strong. A strong part of our team itself comes from an aviation background.
Okay.
So if you look at our team, the technical team, design team at Ultraviolet, it's predominantly across automotive, consumer electronics, and aviation background.
Okay.
Now, how this became like an important requirement is when you look at safety and analysis and simulation, right? Aircrafts are the only other products where you have 99.99% clarity on its performance before you start building a prototype.
Right, yeah.
And safety is very critical in an aircraft. If one system goes down, you need multiple systems to take over.
Right.
That is the same philosophy and approach that has gone into our battery technology, for instance.
Okay.
So folks who worked on the structural side of things, the analysis and the simulation that we go through in terms of both structural, airflow, aerodynamics, all of this are led by folks from an aviation background. Same applies to the battery tech as well. 5 levels of safety, mechanical, thermal, electrical, electronic, software can kick in from microseconds to milliseconds to a second, depending on what has gone wrong. And if you now relate all of this, you could apply the same thing to an aircraft. So that is a very strong part of our DNA. Consumer electronics, very important because your ownership of a product today goes just beyond your interaction with the product. You're talking about a whole connected network where you're getting data on multiple aspects of the product, your association with the company in terms of post-sale service, remote diagnostics, over-the-air upgrades in multiple ways and forms. Now that is where the consumer electronics background comes into play. And so it's an even combination or a tug of war across all 3 domains that has built the F77.
Okay.
And now coming to your question of the name itself. So of course, fighter series aircrafts, the F series, the F14, F18, F35s, F2, the Raptor, all of it, all been fans of all of these vehicles, not just like us, but like a large part of the team as well.
Okay.
So internally, the 7th generation was when we signed off on the final vehicle architecture. And the other 7 had something to do with the specs on the battery. So it was an internal code name, F77, right? And I think before we knew it, we had a few community interactions and this and that where outsiders were part of the design process and programs, and the name leaked, right? And people would ask us, hey, what's happening with the F77? When are you launching the F77?
Official announcement.
It wasn't.
Okay.
Till date, we've never made an official announcement that this bike is called the F77. So it spread really fast. Then we were like, anyway, the name is very true to what we internally represent the vehicle as.
Okay.
So let's just call it the F77. And
Wow. So tell me that, because this is a design podcast, tell me when you thought about Ultraviolette F77 as a product, how important was design in all this process?
right. I think design and tech are above everything else, right? And no compromise on any of this. That's the approach we follow through the whole process, through all of us on the team. And now, specifically with design, our intent was to create a product or overall a philosophy that stands for bold and progressive. I think these have been our two keywords all along in terms of everything we do. The way the product looks, the way the product performs, the way we communicate, the way the product communicates to the world, the way everything that the company does is going to be bold, is going to be progressive.
Okay.
And if you look at the bikes, I think those are two terms that you easily relate with, right?
Right, yeah.
And those were our keywords when we first put pen on paper also. And we were looking at creating a new segment
Okay.
when it comes to motorcycles. And it needs to be like top of the class in terms of performance and very, very provocative in terms of design as well. So Japanese products have a very aggressive lot of cuts and features and sharp angles as part of the design identity, right? You find a lot of animal based relations with Japanese vehicles and things like that. When you look at the Italian product, it's more sensuous and it evokes a different set of sentiments from you. So now through Ultraviolette, through the F77, what do we create as a identity coming out of an Indian performance vehicle? And that was bold, progressive, and that's the right balance between, you know, how clean and how sophisticated and how intentful the vehicle is going to be. So the intent is represented through the stance, the low slung stance, the overall silhouette of the bike, boldness, the whole compact yet muscular feel of the vehicle, progressive, and you haven't seen something of this exact form factor, so it's definitely futuristic. It's a different treatment, and functional honesty is something we have highly prioritized. So that is another thing very deep down in our philosophy as well. If there are multiple design directions, the way we eliminate them is based on functional honesty. Like in an aircraft, if something's not providing a certain function, it just doesn't exist. So that's how we've gone about like the whole design itself in terms of, you look at the exterior design, it's meant to eliminate turbulence when you're going down a high speed straight. You look at the way the CG and everything, the dynamics of the vehicle are designed, it's meant to be extremely applicable in traffic or on a racetrack. And a few examples I can take off to maybe articulate this in a different way. You look at BMW vehicles, right? Very iconic designs, right from the last few decades, where it started with functional honesty. Like, what was the purpose of that grille? Right, it was an air intake system.
Correct, yeah.
Now, why does a BMW electric vehicle have the same grille as just a mere representation? Right, so now you start to question whether now it's superficial versus it began as something very functional.
Correct. Yeah.
Now we see a few companies putting speakers and inducing artificial sound. Why should your electric scooter or bike sound like a Harley Davidson? Right? If it's a new form of technology, we should celebrate that new form of technology.
Correct, yeah.
So it shouldn't be trying to, I'm giving you something new, but also holding on to baggage from the previous years.
Right. So it's not completely honest, so to say. It's little here and there. So again, it's not 0 or 1, it's somewhere in the gray zone.
And this BMW grille, I think designers all over the world are finding issues with it, right? It's just like,
especially the new lineup,
overpowering the vehicle itself.
I don't know what's happening there. But anyway, coming back to Ultraviolette, one thing I really like about the final proposal F77 is the proportions of it. It's definitely something which is not seen before. And like, it reminds me of all those concepts which used to happen.
That we save on our desktops and wish we one day make something like that. Right?
How did you achieve that level of finesse which was there in the concept level to the final production level?
You're right with that, and I think that took a tremendous amount of effort from all people on the team. And see, one thing we strongly feel is when we see a concept bike in an auto show, we go like, oh man, that looks damn cool, right? Then when you see production, it's like a watered down version of what you saw and what you expected.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's been the way of the world. But we were like, it's one shot. Let's try to bridge that gap or narrow that gap down as much as possible. So small things go into this, which like minute things that take 3 months, 4 months of additional development effort to retain that same character.
Okay.
So could we have put the vehicle out a year and a half back or so? Maybe, but then we would have had to be 70% happy with what we were at. But the call was, the whole thing is around building an honest functional product and getting the best of features and performance characteristics and the design to the market. So then we took a call on, let's go all the way and invest time and effort into making this happen. So a lot of smaller instances within that as well. When we showcase the concept, what you see, externally there's not too much of a difference, but in terms of the engineering effort that has gone in to make it happen, it's been tremendous amount of work in the last, say, 2.5 years or so. For example, the headlights, the way we sketch it on paper versus the way the first prototypes are made. There you need to take into account manufacturing constraints, cost constraints, time constraints. Now, how do you still balance these parameters and get an undiluted output?
Functional output.
Yeah. Second is certain things like the older versions of the bike. The frame was enveloping the motor mount and it was a nice structural member.
Okay.
That was working, it was doing the job, but how we felt when when it comes to handling, we need to get the CG a little higher. Now how do we do that? That meant eliminating a certain part of that frame and strengthening the motor mount to take up that stress bearing responsibility.
Wow.
Now that again, you're going back to the drawing board in terms of simulation analysis. Then you're milling it out, prototyping it, testing it on the road, figuring out whether it's meeting the right behavior. Once this is done, is the next challenge of making it mass production friendly. Milling is easy. You take a 3-axis, 5-axis machine, you take a block of metal or plastic or whatever, you create what you want. But from that point to using molten metal or different processes to make it mass production friendly is a very big challenge.
Right. Yeah.
And that whole loop also has been completed. What we do when it comes to design, everyone here is a designer. We don't want to put that bracket of only a person who's sketching on paper as a designer. Basically, it's a collaborative effort. The creative design team, 3D team, design engineering, electronics, everybody comes together for pretty much every subcomponent on the motorcycle.
Okay.
While the overall stance and proportions is between design and engineering in terms of what the package is, what the silhouette has to be, etc. When it comes to the detailed advanced design stage, all teams have to work in collaboration to get a non-compromised effort out there. So one example, maybe look at this caliper mount, right? Starts off with design on paper. This specific thing Akshay was working on for a long time. We explored multiple...
Shout out to Akshay.
Yeah. Multiple directions in terms of what it could be like. And from the sketch, the next stage is making a 3D. Then getting a volume 3D printed in a 1:1 scale.
Right.
So 3D printing is a good tool when it comes to products of a certain volume, where it's either ergonomic checks like a handlebar or a display, or when it comes to functional parts of a certain volume. So then we get a good understanding of the volume in real. I think the next stage is then a few iterations on 3D printing, fine tune it, then print it again. Is it meeting the engineering requirements of manufacturability? Is it meeting the tolerances?
Right.
All of those things are measured. And then say you get to an actual translation from here to the part that goes onto the vehicle itself.
Right. And it's quite close basically.
Yeah. And if you look at the first sketch to this, I think it took about 8 months for this process to run its course, of multiple people, being involved, right from the supply chain team to the engineering team and the design team to get this in place.
Wow. I want to admire one fact that from the concept level to final prototype, there's hardly any difference.
Yeah, you'll see the finer fillets, the transition between one member and the other, and
certainly more refined actually. So
Right.
one step ahead of this guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something very incredible. Awesome.
and see, like parts like this, a true motorcycle enthusiast will look at and admire.
Exactly.
And we are making stuff for that community, right?
Right. Yeah.
Could we have just put a block that has 2 mounting points and done it with a plate in between? Maybe, but
Right. Yeah. Actually, true motorcycle enthusiast will forget about the bike and he'll go in
Yeah.
details like this. And yeah,
And-
people will think we are mad, but yeah.
even stuff like, look at this, I don't think a lot of people have seen yet, the mirrors that go into the F77. So what we wanted to do
It's
was,
quite exclusive, no?
yeah, in that sense, yes. So just a pipe that goes and mounts onto the mirror mount is definitely doable. But what we want to do was this also. If you take any part of the motorcycle, basically, it tells you it's F77. And so it's got that strong yet, skeletal feel. We didn't want a joint here where you have a lot of fit and finish when you
basically.
rotate it. Instead, what we've done is there's a ball joint on which the mirror itself is mounted.
Got it.
So this becomes a hard fixed unit and you adjust the mirror to the angle that you want.
Like a car mirror, basically.
Yeah. Then now from that you go to the production ready version. Again, a good example of,
Yeah. Prototype to the final product.
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, again, there's hardly any difference.
Right.
That is also one good thing.
One part that took us a lot of time to get in place was the swing arm. And you've seen it. It's a chunky, strong looking swing arm.
Right.
We just didn't want to make a box section swing arm. Again, in like development time goes up. Yes. Development cost goes up. Yes. But is it representing what we stand for? Yes. And that for us to mill out the first version of the swing arm, we've actually got one of the units here. Right. So this was what went on to our early motorcycles.
This was a machined.
This was a completely machined unit.
Okay.
And if you look at it, you can see some ribs on the inside, some reinforcements that have been welded here. This is the testing team giving feedback to design team. So testing team put these swing arms on the ground and then on a week by week basis after a few thousands of kilometers, come back and say, I feel there is a little too much flex in this area.
Okay.
Can we have a joint to sort of arrest that flex? Or it's a little too rigid in this sort of cornering situation. So earlier you see this rounded geometry here. Earlier it was more of a pinching
Sharp corner.
sharp corner there. That became a stress concentration zone.
Right.
Like not going to affect your safety as a rider, but in those edge cases where you're getting the feedback from the motorcycle, like it could have been improved. So that is where these reinforcements sort of came in. Now, from this, what you see here is the
Final one.
casted production ready swing arm. So if you look at the number of ribs on the inside, look at the reinforcement and all of this feedback, right? You can see that's been incorporated here.
So you basically managed to keep the style of it intact.
Yeah,
but at the same time
made it better.
made it better, and then keeping in mind the strength part of it, like
Yes.
the functionality part
Yes.
of it. So again, this is an amazing example.
See, like this would have worked on the roads. It's going to last like 100,000 kilometers without a breakdown. But how do you enhance the rider feedback? That was the loop that went in from here to here.
Crazy.
And all of this, the number of ribs on the inside, making it manufacturable friendly, was, I think, one of the biggest challenges in this loop.
So how long did it take to go from this phase to this phase?
About a year. About a year to finish the whole design for manufacture and start getting the samples.
See, this is quite an insight for students or the people who are not aware of what goes into production.
Right.
So
And see, here is an example of where the testing team are playing a pivotal role in design itself.
Right, exactly. So actually, when it comes to design, people only will be aware of, let's say, designers are doing this stuff. But actually, I keep on telling this on my podcast also that design is not just one man, work.
Yeah.
It takes an army to
Right.
make your concept go to road, basically. So, there's going to be testing guys, there's going to be engineers, there's going to be experienced designer. There are so many stakeholders, who,
Right.
So it's basically
And the team interfacing with the supply chain side of things, right?
Yeah.
Can this even be made? Who are the 3-4 guys who can help
Dealing
you
with vendors,
make this?
basically.
Yeah.
All that actually, when you see something on road,
Right.
you might not appreciate everything about it, but
Right.
it's so much work, so many
See, and the other thing is we are a company like just off the blocks. We are fighting with the same guys who have 20-30 years of all of this set in place.
right,
Right, so now you're establishing these relationships, you're establishing the processes. So it's actually,
it's challenge everywhere.
yeah,
But definitely nothing comes easy. So
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
is the best example. Awesome, man. I think not every day you'll get to see things like this, especially if people are from the industry.
Right.
Fine, I am witnessing that.
Yeah.
But I think this will be for the first time that on a public platform, people are going to witness something like this. What
Yeah.
all goes into production. Okay, now that we talked about the mechanical details, of the design.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about the electronics part of it.
Right.
Because that's also equally important,
Yeah.
because we are talking about EVs.
Right.
Right. So tell me something like, do you have similar examples like what we just
Right.
saw in mechanical parts?
Right, right.
Do you have similar examples like where it took a lot of efforts to
Sure.
reach to the excellence when it comes to electronics?
Sure. So I think one good case study will be the batteries, and
Okay.
I think we can't open up a battery right here, right now, but the same sort of simulation, validation, prototyping, testing, back to the drawing board, the same loop has happened on the batteries as well, on the entire battery pack itself, and one of the most crucial components, the BMS, the battery management system. So I've got a couple of older boards here with me. So this, for example, was the 3rd generation of the BMS. The first one was a little bigger, and what we got here is, I think, the 12th generation.
Okay.
So the number of layers in the board has increased, the capabilities have increased, the kind of safety protocols and features that have been embedded onto this is now multifold from here. This was working, this was doing everything that you want a BMS to do.
Okay.
Now, do you want to do additional cell balancing? Do you want to do additional, software related protection layers on the battery? Do you want, we for instance, one of the only companies that have a cell level fuse as well. We got into detailed design of the fuse from the hardware side of things. So fuse sort of, every cell has a fuse where if a certain cell goes into sort of a negative or adverse scenario, you don't want the whole pack getting affected. So you want to isolate that one cell. So even designing the fuse, what is the cross section of metal, or what are the variances from multiple suppliers? How do you make sure all of these materials are going to blow the fuse at the exact same point in time for the exact same situation? If a cell goes into like an overcurrent or over temperature sort of a situation, you isolate that, right? That fuse itself went into about 14 different iterations to get it right.
Okay.
And this, today we're running the 14th generation of the BMS. So along with this, the vehicle control unit is another very, very important part of the, architecture of the vehicle, controlling the entire functionality and power delivery depending on multiple use cases, scenarios.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've gone through 14 generations. Question is, could we have just done 5 and at generation 6 roll it out? Answer is yes, but just the fact that we wanted additional safety and compactness on the batteries is sort of what went the extra mile.
Great. Actually, yeah. So now that we have talked about, design, electronics,
Right.
let's talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial side of this.
Right.
Because there are going to be so many aspiring designers who would want to become an entrepreneur.
Right.
They will be watching this podcast. Tell me something that when it comes to EV,
Sure.
do you think that this space for entrepreneurs, has it become like saturated, or
Sure.
there is still a scope for aspiring entrepreneurs?
Sure. I think with EVs, we are right where the first steam engine was developed. Right? That is the point we are at. There is tremendous scope. What EVs do is open up possibilities in like limitless vehicle applications and use cases. We are still talking about scooters, bikes, cars, three-wheelers, trucks, etc. Right? Now the modularity of not having liquid fuel system or not having like an engine block and a long transmission running across a vehicle opens up various ways in which you can reimagine the architecture itself.
Okay.
And now you add the whole loop of the connected systems, the data that you're getting, how things can be fine-tuned over the ownership period, how the whole connected nature of these vehicles is going to open up our association more closer to gadgets than to vehicles, right? That's the way we are looking at relationships emerging with EVs.
Right. Okay.
So there is a lot that is required from fresh minds coming,
Basically, what you're saying is it's just a start of this revolution.
Yeah.
There's going to be huge requirement of various things in the ecosystem.
Absolutely.
And this is such a nascent stage. I think there's going to be a lot of scope
Right.
for all the entrepreneurs out there. Awesome.
One more point there. Don't look at EVs or don't look at anything as an entrepreneur. Don't look at something as a business opportunity. Are you passionate towards it? Do you have the right skill sets to be in the game? Or do you have the right kind of mindset to wait it out long term and see the effects of what you're putting in over the first few years? These three are super important. Don't just rush into it. We see a lot of companies emerging just because EVs are a hot segment right now. So let me get a kit and sell an EV.
Yeah.
That is going to, we can see it's playing a negative role in the whole perception of EVs itself. So be clear of this as an entrepreneur before you take the leap. And two, don't discount education and experience. We hear glamorous stories about like I'm a college dropout and I started a company and this and that.
It's like, too glorified actually.
It's too glorified, and in that particular scenario and context, it made sense. Like when Zuckerberg started Facebook, Orkut was already growing, right? He had to step into it full time to sort of, help Facebook leapfrog across this thing. It wasn't the cool factor of I'm a dropout, let me start a company. That is the way we pitch that narrative today. But that required that person to take that drastic step at that point in time. So, analyze everything contextually and give the opinion. Work experience also very important. Understand all sides of the equation first before you are confident on what. And for students now, multiple directions. Startups, there's quite a few startups here working on electric vehicles. Of course, the OEMs as well, working for the past few years and have a very set system, process, etc. So multiple directions to take. Even if you want to get into the industry as someone working in a company, I think both are great opportunities it depends on you, what your drive is. If you are the kind of person who wants to go beyond a set role and want to contribute in multiple areas, then a startup would be ideal. If you are someone who is happy that these are the 2-3 things I will do and I will do this for next 5 years, then the other side of the equation is great.
Wow, very well articulated, and I am so happy that you have broken down those myths going around with the startups.
Right.
It's all glorified, but there are so many misinterpretation of stories behind them, and it takes more than that. The drive which you mentioned is a very important factor, that you need to have that drive, you need to have that passion for that particular product or the service or whatever you're gonna develop as an entrepreneur. Don't jump into something because this is a cool and very hot space and it's gonna give you a quick return.
Don't jump into a trend.
Don't
jump into what is going to be a long-lasting effect.
So study every aspect of it and then take a wise decision, calculated step, and then see where it can go. Awesome, man. So I think that was very powerful insight. Cool. I quite liked it.
And one more aspect, right? If you are on that journey, whatever that is, people will give you opinions. Opinions are free, right? So I don't know how to put this across, but you need to get that skill of what is a relevant opinion and what is what should be dismissed right up.
Right.
You need to be open-minded. not always is the first idea the best idea. You maybe get started with the first idea.
Right.
During the course of how things move on, you'll have a lot of inputs, but if you're just, working with blinders on, you don't understand what's coming in towards you from other directions.
Right.
Maybe you lose out on opportunities, but at the same time, be a little astute to figure out what to discard as well.
Right.
Like during our journey also, we've had a lot of people from various backgrounds, from technology side, financial side, multiple entities telling us,
Okay.
why don't you make scooters? Volumes are XYZ. Why don't you make, why don't you focus on batteries as a business? Why don't you do this, that? But who is this advice coming from? It is not the bloody consumer, right?
Right.
Like us, the Indian consumers, we have certain aspirations and certain dreams of having certain kinds of tech and products in our life. But who are these opinions coming from? People not even remotely connected to these consumers. So that is one way to analyze it.
Right. Yeah.
Are my ideas still very much in tune with what the market or the world appreciates and wants? If so, then cool. Are opinions coming from people with different objectives? Then you need to stay strong through that.
So you need a fine balance of conviction in your own idea,
but
at the same
open-mindedness.
time having that open-mindedness, because you don't wanna become that person who is not listening to everyone, and then you are just running in one direction, which probably is not right. So you have to have that open-mindedness, yet with the conviction that you are having some vision and your dream, whatever it is there.
And there's no formula to this, right? So you have to figure it out.
Right?
Yes,
it's all subjective. Things are going to change. The ecosystem is changing.
Right.
You have to play your cards, being sensitive to everything around you. Wow, that is powerful, and that is very relevant advice for all the aspiring students and entrepreneurs. Now, let's lighten up this conversation. We'll come to the final part of this long podcast. Let's talk a little bit more about you as a person, because see, everybody knows that you are this cool, dashing co-founder of Ultraviolette company and all that. You are this designer from reputed college and things like that. But tell us more about who is this person behind the camera? Like, what are your hobbies, interests? What do you do to unwind yourself? Because you are going through I'm pretty sure this is a very hectic and stressful times for you.
Sure.
Right?
Exciting also.
Exciting.
That's the part that keeps it less stressful.
So tell me something, like what do you do to unwind yourself from all that stress and hectic schedule of yours?
One is I've got a very supportive partner, Devika. She's also a designer. We met, we've known each other since NID, and we share a lot of ideas, thoughts, this, that, from different things. I mean, of course, we discuss work, but we discuss 1,000 other things as well. So that, keeps us intellectually engaged in non-work hours. And I love sports.
Okay.
My weekly routine used to be Tuesday frisbee, Thursday football, Friday, Saturday basketball. Okay. And this has been my routine for the last, I think, 10, 15 years or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just broke my leg or my ankle 3 months back, so taking it a little easy to get back to that. But yeah, that really helps me. And the reason I'm saying sports and not any other form of social activity is not like I don't do other stuff and meet friends and go out and have fun, but that, of course, frequency is a lot lesser now. But sports is one zone where you're intellectually, mentally engaged all the time, right? You're trying to win that game and you're trying to think of 100 different possibilities at a split second level to see what is the best move at that point. So no matter what tomorrow morning looks like, 2 hours of basketball tonight is something that gets us totally out of this zone.
What I really enjoy about sports, though, because I also enjoy sports. So what I enjoy about this activity is that because winning or performing becomes so important that you have no option to be focused in the present.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And I consider that as a active meditation. See,
Yeah, that's another good way to put that across.
right?
Yeah.
Because when you are sitting idle in a room peacefully and you're just trying to focus on your mind and thoughts,
Right.
definitely, at least for me,
Yeah,
it's complete chaos. Okay?
right.
So I won't be able to remain calm for more than 5 minutes. But when I am on the field, any
Yeah.
sport, so I enjoy cricket, but any sport,
huh.
when I'm there, even if I'm fielding on the field,
Yeah,
I'm like fully engrossed in that sports.
Yeah.
It's like an active meditation for me.
right.
There's no other thought except winning the match.
Right.
So sports is something which I really enjoy, and I think
That's a very nice perspective, active meditation. I'm going to think about it after this conversation also. But it's true. What is meditation? That helps you
Yeah.
relax, gets your mind in a different zone, right? And
Right.
it's doing the exact same thing.
Dealing-
Another aspect that helps me unwind is teaching,
okay.
right? So it's been out of my mind for a while because we stopped the course at Mantra for the last 2 years because of COVID. So until then, the last 6-7 years, we were actively my weekends, at least one weekday and one weekend was involved with students, right?
Wow.
So that's another zone where you're involved in someone else's thought process, guiding somebody else towards their amplifying their ideas and their thoughts, and also takes you out of the zone.
I think we have quite a common interest because even I enjoy teaching, and I have like two selfish motives for teaching. One, that I feel a huge satisfaction in contributing back to
Right.
society,
Right.
the community,
Right.
design community, that I totally enjoy. And then second thing is it helps me to get the modern perspective of, let's say, what Gen Z is thinking of things,
Sure.
right? So because it's very difficult to understand that
Sure.
sitting in a closed R&D, very
Sure.
confidential zone,
Right.
like meeting the same people,
Right.
the same background,
Right.
same kind of interests.
Right.
When you go and deal with those students who are
Yeah.
like 16, 17 years of age,
Right.
you'll get something very fresh.
Correct. Correct.
Tell me something now that you are dealing with so many things on a daily basis, right? Because you're a co-founder, you have a team to handle, you have your personal life also going on. So tell me something, how do you manage your time for everything? Because it can't be like, here for this I can't, like, I'll be 100%.
Right.
But this is not so important, so I'll be available, like 50% of my presence will be there.
Right.
You can't do that, right? Because everything is equally important. So
Yeah.
I have to be 100% everywhere.
Right.
So how do you keep that, mental state all the time?
I don't know. Like right now, there is no balance.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure
You're just going with the flow.
17 out of 19 waking hours, my mind is occupied with what's happening here.
Wow.
So it's okay. It's required now for the next few months because we are at the most important phase. We're done with R&D. The product is coming out. So yeah, I think next few months, I'm okay with this. I'm also excited by this because this is the most important phase. And sometime once all this is out in the market and things start, more organic growth and scaling,
So
it could
basically-
lead to a better balance. I'm not going to paint a rosy picture here.
So what I understand is that you are very, very cautious about keeping your priorities in line. For example, now UV is your priority, so you are
Absolutely.
dedicated most of your time.
I haven't taken a holiday in the last 6 years. My biggest vacation was after getting married. We went to Goa for 3 days. I think till date that's been the longest break from what's been
Shout out to
happening.
your wife. Cool. Okay. So let's come to the final question about you. That because you are so committed to this company and you are doing so many things, how do you keep yourself motivated every day? Don't you get like fed up that, okay, this is the same routine, 6 years I haven't taken a holiday, and then I'm coming to the same office dealing with the same problems? Do you get that low moment anytime? No, never.
So two things. One is, like, the people we're working with, we share a great chemistry and we enjoy working together. I think two of them are here with us. That is definitely something very, very positive. Two is my internal belief is we should, at a certain point in time in your life or whatever, we only regret the what ifs, right?
Right, yeah.
So rather put all the cards on the table, do things to the max of your capacity, and not 10 years down the line think if what if I had put in more effort? What if we had tried out this other idea? And I'm only scared of a what if situation, and like I work around eliminating that possibility. Say, I think going back to deciding to study versus joining the industry, it was the what if. A great opportunity to get global exposure. The other side also is not bad, it's exciting.
Right.
But one is I can do that and still get back here. Two is if I do this and 10 years later, if it's a what if I had done that in 2012.
Wow. That's a very interesting perspective, because in a way fear is driving you to take more risk.
Yeah.
Because
I would say
it's an irony, but yeah.
I wouldn't call it fear. I'd say it's the
like fear of missing out on things. For example, what if you said that question, what if?
Yeah.
I think what if versus something available. Awesome.
This applies to anything, no? You like a girl, what if you had spoken to her 10 years back, right?
This.
What if, like, I don't know, what if your friend had an opportunity for you to join him on a holiday and something epic happened and you missed out on that? Like,
right, yeah. It's all what ifs.
What if that additional email had gone asking for an internship? Like,
yeah. Oh, that's a philosophical insight. Awesome, man. So, Narayan, we come to the final part of this podcast. Like we have talked about so many things. We have touched upon so many things. You have given like very powerful advices and insights from industry. Do you have any final words of wisdom or advices for aspiring students or designers like me or anyone? If you want to conclude it with some advice, what will be that?
I think to students would be use the time that you have in college very, like max it out. Explore as many different ideas, projects, possibilities as you can. One. Two, be social, make a lot of friends, not just in your domain, but in and around you. Right. Later on in life, they're going to be great influences in what you could do or what you are doing as well.
Wow, okay.
And three is don't ignore fundamentals. Still, I'm sure all seniors everywhere are still saying, sketch more, sketch more. I'm also going to say that. So whatever field of design you're in, learn the art of doodling.
Right.
Don't have to become an artist and make like wonderful illustrations, portraits. Just learn to doodle your ideas on the go. This doesn't take effort. You could be traveling on a flight, you could be on a bus. It could be just like a cool thing you do 20 minutes before you go to bed at night. Just make a habit out of that.
Wow, it's like 3 powerful advices again. Wow, man, Narayan, this has been an amazing conversation.
Likewise, it's been 2 hours or more than that.
Yeah,
didn't feel like
I don't know
a long conversation,
but yeah, it came all naturally, organically. Thanks for doing this.
Sure.
And thanks for sharing your time and wisdom with everyone over here.
Sure.
I'm sure this is going to bring so much value to everyone out there who is listening to us. So thank you again. Thanks for doing this.
Awesome.
And all the best for all your future endeavors.
Thanks. And I'm catching up with you after 10 years. It's been a great couple of days that we've sort of had a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
Cool.